Got
I'm
some
here
fan.
with Jesse and Ben of Stellar Circuits to talk about the brand new record, Sight to Sound, out June 9th on Nuclear Blast. First of all, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time even after we were not very kind to your song and video when we checked it out on the channel. So extra thank you for not holding that against me. The same way I didn't hold it against you guys when I decided to check out the album and see what this record had in store. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I did. But once again, just thank you for taking the time today.
Thank
Yeah,
you, man.
yeah,
We
man.
appreciate it for sure. And we don't hold it against you at all. It's music has to hit you when it hits you, if it ever does. So we like you said, we're grateful that you gave it a second chance.
And for me, I always tell this to my kid: don't judge a band on one song.
Yeah.
Also, depending on your state of mind when you go into that track, how you feel also has an impact on how you're going to perceive the track. I think there's a lot of variables when it comes to music, and that's why when this album hit my inbox, I was like, okay, this is my chance for you guys to prove me wrong, and I'm the idiot in this conversation. So I'm going to dive deep into this record, and I'm going to let the album speak for itself. And the album had a lot of things to say. So let's start off with the title, Sight to Sound. This is a record that to me feels more than just sound. It feels like it has almost 4 dimensions to it. Is that where the name kind of originated from?
I wouldn't say that's where the name originated from, but I will say that just that mind state is something that we've tried to bring to the band since the beginning. We don't think of it as just a musical outlet. It's a multimedia outlet, and we try to express ourselves in a multifaceted way when we're creating an album. So the title tied into that when it started to formulate and take shape. And when those separate wires seem to start to connect, that's when it feels special and we can move forward with it. So the fact that it lent itself to being something bigger than just an audio experience was something that was kind of exciting to explore and move forward with.
What did the debut record teach you guys that you can totally see on this album being influenced by those lessons that album taught you?
We've answered this question a few times in the past month or so. Every time it's a little different, but I would say, just being in the same room with each other and just our experiences that we've had during that time and just learning to write more efficiently with one another. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think everybody getting more comfortable with their way of writing. And we all have sort of a particular way of how we approach the song. It's not really like all 4 members or get in the room and just jam it together. So I think we've just found a more seamless way to approach writing for me and for the guys and how they do their thing. And this one seemed a little more efficient, although it took a longer time. It wasn't necessarily a longer time writing. It just was the way it worked out to where it took longer to get out to the public.
You guys create music that feels very unique to me. I mean, the genre that you guys are in is a genre that also allows for a lot of uniquenesses to it. Progressive really comes down to each one's interpretation of what you see progressive music being like. But if you have to dive deep into Stellar Circuits, what makes this band unique sound-wise?
I think that's hard. It's hard for us to say, to evaluate ourselves is always a tough thing.
I feel like we're just such a melting pot of influence. I saw an interview with Geddy Lee not too long ago. I think it was an older interview, but he mentioned something about how it was about his influences and it was like originality comes from all of the influences that you've had, but it's almost masked or kind of hard to tell and pick out the influences after a while because it's just such a melting pot of inspiration. And I'm sure that people, we've heard a lot of, people saying that we sound like this and that. But yeah, all of us are so much different in the music that we like and our backgrounds as musicians, but we find places within ourselves that we come together and we make something special, I think, together. I don't know.
I will say, like, the idea of music being derivative or not is sort of a subjective thing. A lot of people will hear a band and think it's more of a ripoff, and some people will hear it. And like you said, based on what you've listened to like how you view progressive music, what you've been exposed to is going to influence how you view that. So
product of your
yeah, I
environment.
think it's important for us to not be derivative when we write music and we try our best, but I think, you know, your influences are going to seep out. Hopefully you can find your own voice within that. Yeah, we try our best. So hopefully that comes across.
What kind of vision do you guys have for this album? Are you the kind of band that sets goals, like you have a little vision board on what you want to achieve with the next record? Or is the process a little bit more organic between you guys, and whatever that process leads is exactly where you go?
Well, I feel like goals are different than what we actually like. We don't have any set goal musically. Like when we're writing, we don't really have a goal in mind, I don't think.
But we do keep a vision board.
Yeah.
And we do, that keeps us on track. But yeah, I think it's more about playing what feels right.
Yeah.
And as we grow, we sort of change our perception of what we like to hear and what we like to write. So I think there are small goals though, man. Like production wise, we've had a couple of ideas where we'd be like, I want this to be a little bigger, more layers on this, or more sparse here. But yeah, that's so fluid. It kind of changes over time, so it's hard to put your finger down.
I mean, I would say overall goal, you know, we want to reach more people. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're not gonna like write music that we feel like will just appeal to more people. But obviously, I mean, I feel like any musician wants to be successful in what they put out, and they want people to hear it. We just want people to hear it, whether you like it or not. You know, in this day and age, you just kind of got to try to get it in people's ear holes, like however you can. So,
Like P. Diddy said, there's no such thing as bad press. I guess there's no such thing as
yeah,
a bad listener.
yeah,
yeah. I mean, if somebody gives it a chance, it's like, just like we said initially, man, about your review of our first, it's like, you can't be mad at people. You know what I mean? Like for not liking your stuff, it's kind of arrogant to assume that they should, or it is good. And so they should like it. Although I do seem to remember that your gripe was more with the video than the song.
Yeah,
Which,
definitely more with the video than with the song. Definitely.
Yeah, but
low budget.
Yeah.
Low budget.
Either way, yeah, we appreciate people taking the time, man. There's a lot of shit out there to listen to and check out, and we only have so much time. So when you take the time to listen to music, it means something, even if you don't like it, you know?
And when I was listening to this record, one word kept popping in my mind with every passing song, and that word is hypnotic. This album felt very hypnotic in the sound, that you just are able to create this nice little comfort haze into it, that you know, you blink and next thing you know, you're like 40 minutes into it and you not even realize 40 minutes that had gone by, because time almost becomes irrelevant. It's really about what each song has given you as a listener. I felt almost like when you read a good book. When you read a good book, you're not looking at how many chapters you've read and how many are left. You're just enjoying each page as you go along. This album kind of felt that way. Are you guys okay with the definition of hypnotic for the sound experience on this album?
That's a really nice compliment, man. I think losing track of time while you're doing something is an indicator that something is worthwhile. I've been really digging into this thing that's just like that. It's called the zone of proximal development. It's called being in the zone, you know, like anything you're doing. And when you start to lose track of time, it's just an indicator that you're sort of in a flow state. So that's pretty cool, man. I mean, the music we listen to, the movies we watch, the art we ingest, has that effect on us. So that's cool.
It's, I feel like that's kind of an interesting perspective, because like one goal, like going back to your last question, one goal in mind that we have from song to song is that we, at least instrumentally, and I think vocally as well, we just try to do something different. You know what I mean? Like but in the end result, we hear from a lot of people that it has that certain flow. And we heard the same thing from our last LP from some people. But while you're in it, it's like, it's completely different in your mind. But then when you step back after a year or whatever, and you listen to the album again, it's like, yeah, there is like a certain flow to that we really didn't even realize when we're in the room together and we're just like hashing stuff out and writing, and we're like, every song is different, but it all has its place in the end. And it's like, it's almost like a story. It's weird how that happens.
It was really weird for me, because I was trying to identify, okay, where's the red line here? Like what's connecting this album from beginning to end? And I was listening to it and I'm like, one time around I'm thinking that, you know, the bass, because the bass really pops and I really enjoy the bass. Then another time it's like, oh no, the clean vocals. Then the other time the other time, every time I'm listening to it, I'm picking something different that connects. But it's hard for me to say for sure 100% it's this. But honestly, it didn't really matter, because the differences kind of blended in with the uniquenesses, and then it's really about the moment. It's not about what comes ahead of you or what just left you behind, but rather that specific moment that you're in. And I thought this album captured the moment perfectly.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think sequencing has a little bit to do with that too. After the fact, once we have these songs, we sort of try to find the best flow of an arc between them. And I think it makes a difference to how you order them, but also attempting to write music that has a depth to it. I think all our favorite bands, you don't get the whole thing from your first listen or your first 5 listens. And I think, you know, what we try to do, what great music does, you can come back to it years later and you're still discovering something new within the recording. So I think that's a good goal to have, at least subconsciously.
No, I'm not a huge prog guy. I'll be the first to admit. To me, prog.
I don't.
Me neither.
We're not either.
You know,
It's
sometimes
weird.
there's certain bands that I love, and there's certain bands I just don't get. And
Yeah.
one of the great things about this album is it didn't make me feel inadequate. It didn't make me feel stupid, for a lack of a better term. It felt simplified. It felt like a guy like me who normally doesn't listen to this kind of music, I could actually sit down and enjoy the record. Does that play a factor in your mind that in order to create an interesting sound, a layered sound, a textured experience, you don't have to overcomplicate everything that goes into the music?
Yeah, we don't. I think for me and Jesse, we have sort of an interesting relationship with technicality per se too. We actually didn't start playing music till we were about 19, a little bit older than some cats. So I think our chops, maybe in the beginning, we sort of just jumped into making music a little quicker. And also just pertaining to the stuff we like, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. You don't want to try and write something that's too intellectual or heady or proggy or any
Yeah,
of that. It's more about feeling, you know, and I think you alienate a lot of people, but really it comes down to ourselves too. Like, we don't want to hear math problems in music, you know, but again, coming back to the subjectivity, everybody has a different relationship. So depending on what you grew up listening to versus what you're listening to now, something might sound more or less proggy. But to me, I've always felt like the best, most all-time bands, when I think of somebody like Hendrix or Tool or anybody that's great, are people that are able to write music that appeals to people that don't live in music and don't play music, but also is interesting enough to people that do dedicate their lives to music. It's a tall order, but
yeah. And to add to that, I can't say that I've never liked progressive music because, I grew up on like stuff like Rush and stuff like that. So,
and we're big Animals as Leaders fans.
Yeah,
So there's
really
plenty of
changed.
prog bands that we love, but it's not like prog is the highest on the pedestal or anything. It's just another piece to what makes music interesting, I think, you know.
Yeah, Animals was a big one at that time. Carnival was a big one for us. It kind of it's like we grew up on stuff like Deftones and Incubus and Tool and stuff like that. And then we found these bands that were more progressive. And I think it kind of like sent us in a different trajectory as a band, maybe at that time, because it was a really important time in our progression as a band. But we still find that balance when we write. It's like we're not trying to write all the notes. We're not trying to play all the notes. It's more just it's more so just about the feeling and in the moment, like you had mentioned. So
one of the great things about this album is the bass sound. Man, the bass really pops, and I love it. And I think that was the first thing that made me go back and listen to the record the second time around, was how good the bass was the first time around. I was like, man, this bass is outstanding. The sound, how it comes across in the mix, the impact that it gives from an emotional perspective to the songs. What do you feel the bass needs to be in the mix and sound wise in order for Stellar Circuits to have that uniqueness from that point of view?
Thank you first off. But as we mentioned, like there's a lot of bands that I really loved growing up and I hate to keep harping on Tool, but Tool was like a big influence on me when I was growing up. And I really personally, as a bass player, I don't really like have a lot of bass players that I really looked up to. It was more so like guitarists that I like the sounds, and like the effects and stuff like that. This time around, I didn't use as many like effects as I did on Ways We Haunt, but I still use like modulation stuff like delay. I like delay a lot. Because you can really set a precedent for a song in when you start with a bass delay or like Catch Your Death. That's like, kind of like what started that whole song. It's just easy to like shape an emotion with like modulation with the bass or guitar. But I kind of lost what the question was.
For you, like, where does the bass need to be sound wise and in the mix in terms of for the band to have that DNA that it's really important?
Even with the guitar, really, and that's why I mentioned Tool in the first place, is because Chancellor in Tool is like almost like a second guitarist in the band. And he's even with the guitar. Like when you hear him live, it's just so present in the mix. And I like traditional bass in a mix too, just like lower and not playing as many notes, but that's just what we do, and I think a lot of that has to do with Tyler, our drummer, and I starting a lot of the foundations for songs. So it ends up being a bigger piece in the puzzle when we're adding guitars secondary. It's not always like that, but a lot of them start that way. It's like as a foundation. So.
And Ben, for you vocally, what do you feel are your strengths, and what do you feel like you still need to maybe improve a little bit on in order to give you maybe more tools to work with in future records?
I think, again, it's sort of hard to evaluate yourself and what you think your strengths are. I think I've always been a very emotive musician. I've always been a very improvisational musician. That's sort of my background. So I appreciate the ability for myself to just dive into a song and really be open to it. I'm always pushing myself as a musician, though. My baseline is just technically to become more of a proficient singer. This year, one thing in particular was I just sort of have gotten off on a tangent with screaming and sort of dedicating more daily practice time to sounds that I don't even listen to a whole lot, like deathcore sounds and things like that. But I love the voice, man, and I love messing around with different sounds. So that's something that I always keep in mind. And other than that, I just try to write as often as possible and really just be open to where I'm at right now. I think that's usually the biggest thing is a hang up of just putting things out there self-consciously as a writer and as a vocalist. So trying to be more technically proficient and trying to be as free as possible are my two goals.
I thought your clean vocals on this record, pun fully intended, which were stellar. Honestly, like, man, those clean vocals were fucking haunting. I was like, I don't know where this dude is pulling this voice from, but it's just like it's touching my soul, man. Like it just had that I was so warm, so inviting, the way you come across on these tracks. So outstanding work. I honestly I fell in love with your voice on this record. I thought it was just that and the bass were my two pillars of strength as far as this record was concerned. I mean, not to say that everything else wasn't good, but to me, those were the two main spinal cords, if you will, and everything else was branches off of it. And I think for a record like this, those two things play an important role in is the record going to work or not, in order to have that more hypnotic vibe that I was talking about earlier. Was every song on this album equally to itself in terms of the creation process, or is there a track that stands out in being a little bit more difficult to shape and mold to what the final result was on the record?
So yeah, like as I mentioned before, like we think of each song individually, if that's what you're asking. Like there's no songs on the album that branched off of another one, or
so some of them come together a little easier than others, and others take a little longer. I tend to forget the process a little bit. Jesse does too. Tyler's usually better at remembering exactly how each one went down. But we sort of just put our heads down, man, write a song. Once that's done, go on, write another one. Those guys will typically work on them simultaneously, but yeah.
Or there's ideas that hang around forever and then you just come back to them.
But some are just a little tougher to hash out and some come together easier.
I know I know, for instance, I know our lead single Witch House was a little bit different for us. Like we wanted it to be like heavy through and through. Like that was something that was different for us. Like we didn't yeah, we didn't have like we didn't have like an ultimate plan, but we did want it to just be like this driving force through and through. And I feel like because it was so different for us in the writing process, that one hung around for a while before we finished it. And then it ended up being some of our favorite songs on the one of our favorite songs on the album, and the label seemed to agree. So we went with that with the lead single. But yeah, I don't know. Other than that, I don't really know.
Yeah,
It's hard to know the process.
it's hard to remember sometimes.
So this is your second record. Some bands take 3 albums, 4 albums to find their sound, to find their footing. Have you guys found your footing, found your sound yet?
Man, I never feel like we have. I never
I feel like we're
we do.
closer
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
but I don't know if that's a place you can ever really arrive at fully. I mean, I think that you can look at other people's music and evaluate that, but for us, we're always so in the process, and it's hard for us to feel like, well, we've made it now. We figured music out. We got the shit. It's like music's hard, man, but it's so fulfilling, and we really just kind of obsess over the process. So it's the means to an end, or the destination sometimes gets a little foggy. We just try to keep working at it, and it's like mining for gold, just hoping that we can strike something.
And every time that we've written an album, well, every time, the last album and the previous one, the writing process has been a bit different. Like this last one, we had somebody else riding with us, so it was a little bit different, and just like learning about that person and having learning about Jared and like his personality and his writing techniques and whatnot. So it's like I feel like that definitely impacts the writing process. We're actually like, and not to take precedent over this album, but we've been writing another album as well for a while, because we've had so much downtime between these 2 albums and getting signed and all that stuff. So but I feel like even more so now, this new stuff that we've been writing that people aren't going to hear for a while, but like I feel like we've more so stepped into I don't know, what I perceive as more so like our identity as a band, maybe.
I think it's also like whatever an artist is working on at that time is probably going to feel like the most realized version of themselves.
True. It's like a snapshot of that very
Yeah,
moment,
so it's hard to say, man. I think it would be a little
it's an interesting question, though.
Yeah, it would be a little arrogant for us to say that we've arrived and we've figured it out, you know what I mean? But
Well, now you have an album just sitting around the corner and people will be able to listen to it. My last question for you guys is, what's next for you? Are you planning some shows? Are you thinking of coming north of the border, playing in Toronto? We have the
Yes.
Rush Brewery here near most of the venues. You guys can go grab some Rush beer if you want. I'd be more than happy to take you guys there for some beers. So what's the plans?
hey, man, getting on the road, playing shows, and supporting this record is our number one goal. We're setting up touring now for the fall. We want to do as much international touring as possible. Canada is definitely on our minds, south of the border and in Europe. So other than just utilizing our downtime productively on new material, our number one goal is getting out on the road and playing these songs for people. It's been a while since we've toured, putting these albums together. So that's a big priority.
You'll hear something soon.
Yeah, we'll announce. We've got some things in the works that we're ready to announce. And we're excited about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm excited to see you guys north of the border. Like I said, if you come to Toronto and you want to go check out the brewery that has the Rush beer, I'm more than happy.
Definitely, dude. We'll take you up on it.
It's a nice little patio outside, so you can sit outside the brewery and try it right there firsthand, fresh off the draft. So I'll be more than happy to facilitate that for you guys. I think it's the least that I can do after my less than stellar review of your music video. So I feel like I owe you guys one. And we'll build bridges instead of burning them down.
All is forgiven. It's all love, man. We appreciate you,
Yeah,
man.
appreciate
And
it.
thank you for the kind words and taking the time to listen to our album, man. It really means more than you know, man.
I hope my words reach other people and other people take the time to listen to the record and pick up the record. I honestly, this is an album that's going to be hard to forget. It's a really well crafted, put together album from a design point of view and then from a soundscape point of view. I honestly really enjoyed it. I was blown away by it. Congratulations on the great album that you guys have.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate
That's
it.
very kind of you, man. Peace to you, man.
No problem, man. Take care, guys. All the best.
Later.
Thank you.